Who is God? This is the question that has been plaguing mankind for eons. Who is He? How do we know Him? How do we identify Him? Is there such a thing as a God? Is it, as the New Age mentions, a universal energy or a collective conscious? This is the question we're going to be asking and answering today. And we're going to be challenging a God, the God. God, we're saying, who are you? If you are there, come through, identify yourself, and show us who you are. Prove to us that you are God. You see, today in the world, there are many, many gods available. You've got the Maitreya, the New Age Maitreya. You've also got the cosmic Christ, the Christ. You've got some people worship Lucifer, that's their God. You've got the universal energy. You've got Buddha. You've got Shiva for the Hindus. You've got Allah for the Muslims. You've got Jesus Christ, who's also God supposedly. Who is God? How do we know who He is? Are they all the same thing? That's what I used to believe. How does it work? Are Allah and Buddha and Shiva, the people that worship them, worshipping the same as what we worship when we worship Jesus Christ, just in a different form? Well, this is a very difficult question. And we're going to have to get to the bottom of this before we can continue with the rest of the lectures. That is the question today. Who is God? Jesus Christ says some pretty interesting things. In fact, I'd call them arrogant. In Exodus 34:14, there's a reference to the God of the Israelites or the God of the Bible. He says, "For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord God is a jealous God." It also says in Deuteronomy 5 verse 9, "Thou shalt not bow thyself unto them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord, am thy God, am a jealous God." So an identifying characteristic of the God of the Bible is what they call monotheism, where pagan religions have polytheism, multiple gods. The monastic religions have one God, and He claims to be the one and only true God. Jesus Himself in John 6:38 said, "For I came down from heaven." Now that's not something I could say. It's not something you can say. So this is where Jesus starts to assert His authority. In John 18 verse 36 He says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Again, something that can only be claimed by somebody that is not of this world. In other words, somebody that's got a certain element of supernaturalism to him. I remember reading about when speaking about Jesus, Peter and John said in Acts 4 verse 12, this is from the English Standard Version Bible, it says, "And there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved." No one else? So, if I'm a Muslim, can I not be saved through Allah? This is a very, very hard subject. If this is true, Acts 8 verse 42, no other name under heaven, then what about the Hindus who worship Shiva as one of their gods? Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me." Now, that is a powerful statement. That is calling yourself, bomb, I am it. No other way except through me. So Jesus is then claiming to be the only channel. Now, if this is possible, if this is a possibility, there's only two options. Either He's being arrogant, or it's the truth. And the reason why we have to look into this is we have to ask the question, is Jesus Christ really the only Savior? Why is this an important question? Well, think about for a moment you're running a marathon. And we were watching the Tour de France, which is on, and I was thinking to myself, there's a perfect example. You've got the winner of the Tour de France claiming victory over the Tour de France, over the cycle race, or a marathon. Question. If you have one winner, how many other winners can there be? Well, if there's one winner, the others are by default false winners or losers. Right? So, if there's one true God, then this is the hard part. By default, all the other gods become false gods. So if we ask Jesus Christ the question, "Excuse me, sir, are you the God, or are you God? Are you Christ, the God?" And if you are God, then prove to us that you are God. Because if you're going to be able to do that, that means I have to come from my other religion into serving Jesus Christ, because there is no other name under heaven by which man can be saved. This is a very difficult discussion. And we're going to have to go into some pretty strong information to convince us of this subject. Well, the Bible gives us 3 solutions to this problem. When I say the Bible, the third solution is extra-biblical. In other words, from outside the Bible. So we'll take 2 from the Bible, and then we'll compare what the Bible says versus what science says. So let's look at the 3 options. Number 1, prophecy. Number 2, time prophecy. And number 3, science. The first solution has to do with prophecy. Now, why is prophecy so important? Well, think about this concept for a moment, right? You and I, we live inside the timeline. In other words, we cannot see into the future from where we are at the moment. But if you are God, it means that you must live outside the timeline, and you can see past, present, and future all at the same time. Therefore, you can tell somebody something that's going to happen in future. And that proves that you live outside the timeline, and that automatically proves that you are God. Right? So all the other gods need to be able to do the same if they are really true gods. So let's look at the example. David, who was writing Psalms approximately 1,000 years before Christ was born, Psalm 22 verse 1, said the following: my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I'd like to use the word risk. Because what the psalmist is saying, when God is on earth, he will be saying the following words. Can you imagine taking the risk of trying to predict what somebody would be saying? Well, it was fulfilled 1,000 years later in Matthew 27 verse 46. It says there, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? 1,000 years later, the fulfillment of those exact words. Let's look at another prophecy in Psalm 34 verse 20. He keepeth all his bones, not one of them is broken. Written 1,000 years approximately before Christ, fulfilled in John 19:33. It says in John 19:33, but when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they brake not his legs. Now, this is interesting, and we're going to get into that a bit later in this lecture, where we look at the Passover lamb. But what happened here is when people were crucified, they were crucified on the Friday afternoon, with Saturday being the Sabbath, from Friday evening to Saturday evening being the Sabbath. They had to crucify the people before the Sabbath, and they weren't allowed to work with these people on the Sabbath, because the Sabbath was a day of rest. So if the person was alive on the cross as they entered the Sabbath, he might have had 24 hours in which he could wiggle himself off the cross. So if you were alive at the start of the Sabbath, somebody would come around with a big club and would break the kneecaps of the people that had been crucified, that way causing them to suffocate as they hung on the cross, their lungs being crushed together. And obviously they wouldn't be able to climb off the cross. So this was predicted 1,000 years before Jesus was crucified. And at his crucifixion, when they came to him, came to Jesus, according to John 19:33, and saw that he was dead already, they broke not his legs. Isn't that amazing? David also wrote in Psalms 41 verse 9, mine own familiar friend which did eat of my bread hath lifted up his heel against me. People often think that it's only about Jesus Christ that certain prophecies were made. That's not the case. Even Judas had prophecies. There was a prophecy about Judas. And guess what? It was fulfilled 1,000 years later, where in John 13:18 it is written, he that eateth bread with me has lifted up his heel against me. Perfect fulfillment. 3 prophecies over 1,000 years apart are fulfilled. Isaiah lived approximately 700 years before the birth of Christ. And he wrote in Isaiah 7:14, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. So here the Bible is describing not only will we be able to predict what he will say, we'll also be able to predict what his name will be. That's a risk if you are inside the timeline. If you're outside the timeline, it's quite easy to see what his name will be and give that same information to somebody else along the timeline. Matthew 1 verse 23 explains that this was fulfilled in perfect accordance to the prophecy. Behold, a virgin shall be with child and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. Now, God in the Bible has many names. He's known as Yahweh, he's known as Yeshua, Jesus, Emmanuel, each one identifying certain characteristics of that person. In the Bible, a name is a representation of the characteristics or the character of a certain individual. Like Jacob, that was changed to Israel after he wrestled with the angel and overcome. He became known as the overcomer. Micah, who also lived as a prophet 725 years before Christ, wrote in Micah 5 verse 2, But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be the ruler in Israel. This is very specific. Even pinpointing which Bethlehem Jesus will be born in. This is fulfilled 700 odd years later. Matthew 2 verse 1, there's this description. Now Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Perfect fulfillment of prophecy. One more, let's try one more. Zechariah, 520 years approximately before the birth of Christ. 500 years before Christ. He said, O daughter of Zion, now listen to this. If this is not phenomenal, then I don't know what is. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is lowly, and he's riding upon an ass, a donkey, right? Oh, but hold on, that's not enough. Upon the colt, the foal of an ass. So I'm going to tell you what BMW he's going to be in. It's not just going to be a green BMW. It's going to have a CD player, an MP3 player with leather seats. That's what Zechariah is doing here. He's able to even predict that the means of transport for Jesus is going to be not only an ass, but the colt, the foal of an ass. And guess what? Perfect fulfillment. Isn't that incredible? Matthew 21 verse 5. Tell ye the daughter of Zion, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, meek and sitting upon an ass, and the colt, the foal of an ass. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. The place of Jesus' birth was predicted. The manner of his birth was predicted. His betrayal was predicted. The manner of his death was predicted. And guess what? Every single one was fulfilled. You see, this is where God starts to put his foot on the accelerator and accelerate away from other gods, where he starts to prove himself to be the true God. Now, it's all good and well that we look into the Bible and we say, well, the Bible proves the Bible. But we have to look outside the Bible and take an objective perspective on this. Does the Bible stand when comparing it to history or science or archaeology, etc.? So we look into history and we say, does history confirm what the Bible says about Jesus Christ? Well, Tacitus, who was a Roman historian around 115 Anno Domini, he was speaking about Nero's persecution. Nero was an emperor who persecuted the Christians in a terrible way. And he was speaking about those persecutions of the Christians in about AD 46 years after the birth of Christ. This historian wrote, Christus, from whom their name is derived, the Christians, who was executed at the hands of the procurator Pontius Pilate in the reign of Tiberius. History, pure secular history, proving that the Bible is accurate. Another one, a guy by the name of Suetonius, who was a Roman historian of the same period, he speaks about a guy by the name of Chrestus. Since the Jews were continually making disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus, Claudius expelled them from Rome. So again, this is the command when Jesus says, go back into the lost house of Israel. History determines and specifically acknowledges that this was the case. The people were going back in, and then even Claudius had to kick them out of Rome. Now, for some people, that's not enough. And it certainly wasn't enough for me. So what? Maybe that historian had his finger in the pie as well. How do we know that this is actually true? One of the questions which is often raised is Pontius Pilate. You can prove Jesus, you can prove everything, but Pontius Pilate never existed. This is a claim especially put together by atheists. And the Lord had this one covered as well, because in 1961, they uncovered this block of stone. And on it was an inscription which says, Tiberius Pontius, Prefect of Judea. Written in stone was the name of the prefect of Judea. This discovery proved beyond any doubt to shut up the critics about the biblical accuracy and the historic accuracy of the whole events surrounding Jesus Christ. One time it wiped out all the discontent, or maybe not the discontent, but it certainly wiped out any preconceived ideas of trying to prove that Jesus wasn't God. There it was, written in stone, not by the biblical scholars, but by history. Let's go over to the second solution, time prophecy. Now, I'm specifically focusing on time prophecy because there's a big difference between prophecy and time prophecy. Prophecy is a vast subject in itself, but it's the ability to stand outside the timeline and be able to say, well, over there, so-and-so is going to happen, so I'm going to give so-and-so that information over here so that they can predict it. But when you go to time prophecy, the Lord changes gears and says, boom, let's go to the next gear. Prove that I am God. Not only does he predict ahead of time that certain things are going to take place, but now he tells us when they're going to take place. Daniel 8, verse 13 and 14. A question is raised while Daniel is in vision. He says, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? This is the question that is raised in Daniel's heart. Interesting thing to notice is that when you're reading the King James Version Bible, there's certain words in italic. Those words were not in the original translation. So this would read, how long the vision, the daily. Meaning, when they've added the words in to help it make sense for us, it now reads, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily, and what happened daily was the sacrifice and the transgression of desolation. So this is the question raised. And then in verse 14 it says, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So what? I hear people tell me, so what? 2,300 days. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that the Lord has given us a period of 2,300 days. Boom! Out of the timeline from the start to finish, 2,300 days, something special will happen in that period of time. We don't know when it starts, we don't know when it ends. We just know that there is a period. Now, the question is, in verse 17, he then says, but understand to me, O Son of Man, that for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So don't worry too much about understanding this at the moment, but just know that right at the end of time, where I believe we are at the moment, this prophecy of the 2,300 days is going to come into full, flourishing fulfillment at the end of time. So Daniel 9:24 says a wonderful thing. It says, take that 2,300 days and do something with it. 9:24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end to sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Wow! Let's stop for a second. 2,300 days has been given to the prophet. Out of that is a period of 70 weeks, right? And that 70 weeks has to do with two things, thy people and thy holy city. It then says to finish transgression, make an end to sin, and make reconciliation for iniquity. Now, according to Christianity today, the only person that could have done that would be Jesus Christ. So this 70-week prophecy has somehow to do with Jesus Christ. Well, let's look at it. I just want to stop for a second and bring to mind an experience that I had when I was watching television a while ago. I was watching one of the Christian channels, and on this channel was Pastor Benny Hinn. And there he had an interview with some of his pastors on the Isle of Patmos. We'll be going into Benny Hinn in a later lecture. But he had his pastors around him, and he asked, well, they were busy reading through the revelation of Jesus Christ on the Isle of Patmos, which is where John wrote the revelation of Jesus Christ. He penned it down. And that he was reading, and he wrote about how the dragon, with the tail of the dragon, sweeping 1/3 of the stars out of heaven. And his pastor said to him, Pastor Hin, tell us, what are those stars that are falling from heaven? And Benny Hinn said, those stars are the nuclear bombs that are going to fall on America. And I thought to myself, wow, he obviously hasn't read 2 Peter 1 verse 20. Because 2 Peter 1 verse 20 explicitly tells us in no uncertain terms, knowing this first, that no prophecy of the Scripture is of any private interpretation. No prophecy is of any private interpretation. You can't get around this. Don't do it because it's not for you to interpret. When the Bible speaks in prophetic language, the Bible has to tell us how to unlock prophecy. That's what the next lecture is about. Understanding prophecy, the structure of prophecy. How do we work through it? We'll get into that in the next lecture. But just know that what was written about 1,000 years before Christ has to mean the same thing 2,000 years after Christ. And I don't think that at the time of Christ or just after Christ, they had nuclear bombs. So when he's speaking about the stars from heaven, at that time, it has to mean the same as the stars from heaven at our time. That's why it cannot be interpreted in any private interpretation. So, the Bible says, when you're discussing prophecy, and we're now specifically referring to time prophecy, take each day that I give you and turn it into a year. Ezekiel 4 verse 6 tells us, I have appointed thee each day for a year. This is confirmed then in Numbers 14 verse 34. When you're speaking prophecy, after the number of the days in which ye search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, shall ye bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and ye shall know my breach of promise. So when I'm speaking prophetic language, I'm going to have the same wording as years, but I'm going to use the word days. So this is one of the keys to unlock prophecy, right? The Bible unlocking the Bible. Now, if the prophetic scale is one prophetic day equals one prophetic or one real year, then one prophetic week equals 7 physical, literal years. Right. So, 70 weeks are determined upon 2 things, thy people and thy holy city. So, 70 weeks times 7 days comes to 490 days. You take 1 day for a year, 1 day for 1 year, so 490 days equals obviously 490 years. Now, have I said that? No. The Bible has told us how to unlock prophecy in the Bible. So here's a period of 2,300 days, which later on we'll work in a later lecture, how that's 2,300, 1 day equals 1 year, so that's 2,300 years. Of that, take 490 years for something specific to happen to thy people and thy holy city. This has got to do with the Jews, Jerusalem, and Jesus Christ. Now, a very sad truth is that the Jewish hierarchy didn't really like the prediction of this Messiah because it blatantly shows some characteristics around who he is, where he is, when he's going to come. So what they did in the Talmudic law, page 978, section 2, line 28, go and have a look at it. There's what's called the rabbinic curse. It states the following. May the bones of the hands and the bones of the fingers decay and decompose of him who turns the pages of the book of Daniel to find out the time of Daniel 9:24 to 27. These people don't want you to read Daniel 9:24 to 27. And may his memory rot from off the face of the earth forever. I remember reading a story about a gentleman who was lying in hospital, a Jewish scholar, maybe not a scholar, but certainly a devout Jew. And he was fully aware of his blockage from reading the Daniel 9:24. And he had a Bible next to his bed, which he opened up, and he was reading through his Bible, and he was getting more and more nervous the closer he got to 9:24, Daniel 9:24. And as he got there, he closed the Bible, and he said, I thought to himself, why can't I read this? And he battled with this for some time, and eventually he thought, I'm going to read this. You know what it says? Well, let's have a look at it. Daniel 9:25. Know therefore and understand from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Bomb. This man lying in the hospital bed got such a fright that he dropped the Bible. Now the Old Testament, the scriptures, is a holy book for the Jewish people. And for him to drop or throw the Bible, to drop it even, is not something you want to do. He got such a fright, he said, but this is a prediction about the coming of the Messiah. And then he went further and he read it, and he's now writing saying his life has been changed forever. You see, Daniel 9:25 says 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Right? So now the Lord is not, you've got 2,300 days, and out of that, you've got 70 weeks. And out of that, you've got 7 weeks and 62 weeks. You see, 62, all that means is 62. Right, so let's look at it. 7 weeks equals 49 days. You take 1 day for a year in prophecy, so that's 49 years. 62 weeks is 434 days, if you work it out. Take 1 day for a year equals 434 years. So here's 2 periods inside that 490-year period where the Lord says, take the 49 years for something and take another 434 years for something. So we're still not sure really where this starts and where it ends, but in Daniel 9:25 it gives you a specific command. It says, from the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince. So from there to there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, it doesn't take rocket science to go and check up whether this is fact or not. Wikipedia, which is a free encyclopedia on the internet, you can go and check it if you want, and I suggest you do. You go have a look in the 450s before Christ, and you'll see 457 BC, the decree of Artaxerxes I to reestablish the city government of Jerusalem. Just pure historical fact. When did the reestablishment of the city government and the restoration of Jerusalem take place? When did it start? In other words, when did the Comrades Marathon start? When did the race start? When the trigger was pulled. And that happened 457 BC. Plus 49 years, plus 434 years. This is going to be an interesting calculation. So, we've got the starting date of 457 BC. And that is the starting gun of this race. Artaxerxes, king of Persia, issues the decree to restore Jerusalem in 457 BC. Bang! There we go. You add it up, 457 plus 434 years plus 49 years, considering that there's no 0 year, because you go minus 4, minus 3, minus 2, minus 1, 1, 2, 3, you come to the date of 27 AD. Now, when you're looking at the word Messiah, because it says it'll be such a period of time until Messiah the Prince, the word Messiah means anointed one. Would you dare to ask the question, in which year was Jesus anointed? Or baptized is just another word. Do you like to guess which year he was baptized? Well, let's go and have a look which year it was. Luke 3 verses 21 and 22 say the following. Now, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when all the people were baptized, it came to pass that Jesus, also being baptized and praying, the heaven was opened, and the Holy Ghost descended in a bodily shape like a dove upon him. And a voice came from heaven which said, Thou art my beloved Son, in thee I am well pleased. Which year did this take place? According to Luke, the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius. And go into history and check which was the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius. 27 AD. Wow! Just the concept of this is phenomenal. God isn't only predicting what's going to happen, He's going to tell us when it's going to happen. Now, if calculated, this prophecy would destroy Judaism. Why? You see, because what happens is, if the Jewish people are still waiting for their Messiah, and if they had access to this prophecy, they would realize that Jesus was the Messiah. That's what it's there for. That's why Paul writes in Galatians 4, verse 4, he says, But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth His Son. Question, what fullness of time? What fullness of time? It's said again in Mark 1:15, and saying, the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent ye and believe the gospel. Which fullness of time? Obviously the fullness of time as spoken about in the Old Testament in Daniel. Paul knew it. The writers of the gospel knew it. 7 weeks and 62 weeks, 62 weeks. Now, initially we said how many weeks? 70 weeks, right? Now he's given us 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now you add those together, you get 69 weeks. We're missing 1 week. See that? We're missing a week. What about the 70th week? Well, the Lord doesn't leave anything to chance. Daniel 9, verse 26 and 27. After that period, after 62 weeks, shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. So, here the Lord explains, after that 69th week, there's something is going to happen. He's going to be cut off, but it's not going to be for himself. So he's going to die, he's going to be shut down, not for himself. And he will confirm a covenant with many for that 1 week. Oh, and in the middle of that week, he'll bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Now, obviously in the Old Testament, you had to bring a sacrifice and you had to slaughter your lamb, etc., to receive forgiveness. And he's going to bring an end to that in the middle of that week, in the middle of that 70th week. So, how many days are there in a week? Obviously, there are 7. So, the half of 7 would be 3.5, right? Now, 3.5 years from the autumn of 27 AD, you add on 3.5 years, you come automatically to the spring of 31 AD. What do you think happened in the spring of 31 AD? Do you want to risk it? Well, let's have a look. C. Mervyn Maxwell writes, Jesus' crucifixion occurred 3.5 years after his baptism. That is to say, in the spring of AD 31. Unbelievable. To 100% perfection, the fulfillment of these prophecies are taking place. So the 70-week prophecy started in 457 BC. Jesus was baptized in 27 AD. He was crucified in 31 AD in the middle of the 3.5 years. But what about the end of the 3.5 years after that? That's approximately 34 AD. What happened? Because you can't leave it at 69.5 weeks. It's got to be the 100% fulfilled. Well, Matthew 10, verses 6 to 7 says the following. But go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Jesus is telling his disciples to do what? He says, I'm going to give you a commission to take this out into the world, this truth about Jesus Christ. But first, I want you to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So go back into Judaism. Go back into Israel and tell them about this truth. Right? So Acts 6 verse 8 to 10 tells us the following story. Now Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and miracles among people. And they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. This is exactly the problem. According to the command of Jesus Christ, they went back into Israel, and the people were loving this truth. They were absolutely gobbling it up. Acts 7 verse 58 says the following, and they cast him out of the city and stoned him. So they stoned Stephen for preaching the gospel. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at a young man's feet whose name was Saul. Now, this is where this whole story takes a fantastic turn, right? Stephen is preaching back in the house of Israel, in the Jewish nation, according to the commandment of God. Then they kill him. The people who are throwing the stones have to take off their jackets because they don't want to get dusty, and they lie their jackets down at the feet of the guy who was persecuting the new Christians, and his name was Saul. So here you have this interesting occurrence, right? Saul was consenting unto his death, unto the stoning on Stephen. And at that time, there was a great persecution against the church, which was at Jerusalem. This is Acts 8, verses 1 to 3. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church. This guy that's got all the clothes at his feet, entering into every house and hailing men and women and committed them to prison. So the man who hated the church and persecuted them, he's holding on to the clothes of the people that are stoning Stephen, right? And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus. This is Acts 9, 3-5. And suddenly there shined around him a light from heaven, and he fell to the earth. This is who? Saul. Suddenly there shined a light around Saul from heaven, and he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, who thou persecutest. This was a bit of a turnaround moment in Saul's life. Just like I had that in my life, this was his moment, right? Here he is, he's just held onto the clothes of the people that stoned Stephen, and now the Lord comes and stops him and says, Why are you persecuting me? Acts 9 verse 6 says the following. And he, Saul, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. One of the most important things today in Christianity is that people believe they receive commissions from God. Benny Hinn, as another example, he said, I saw God and God told me what to do. Well, God doesn't work like that. Acts 9:6 is a perfect example. Here Saul is in communication with God, right? God is speaking to him. And he says, God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And God doesn't say, well, I want you to go here, and I want you to do that, and I want you to do this. He says, I tell you what, go into the city, and there, in my church, they will tell you what to do. God always works through his church. Right? He always works through his church. Never does he work directly with an individual when it comes to accepting a responsibility or a ministry. The submission to the church was the first thing that Saul had to do, was to admit that those he had persecuted was those he had to work with. God never works outside his own structures. Very, very important point. Acts 9:17-18. And Ananias went his way and entered into the house, and putting his hands on him said, Brother Saul, the Lord, even Jesus that appeared unto thee in the way that as thou camest, hath sent me, and thou mightst receive thy sight and be filled with the Holy Ghost. And immediately there fell from his eyes that it had been scales, and he received sight forthwith and arose and was baptized. You see, this is how the Lord works. He'll stop you, as he did with me, but he'll then send you to his system. He puts a system in place, and he expects you to submit to the authority of that system and then accept your commission through that system, because God is working inside that system. And there fell, as it had been, scales from Saul's eyes. Physical scales, but also spiritual scales. He started to see things that he previously spiritually couldn't have seen before. So mercy lingered with the Jews until they not only had rejected Jesus Christ, they crucified Christ, AD 31. But not only did they reject him, they also rejected his followers. And Stephen was stoned in AD 34. Perfect fulfillment of the 70-week gospel. So, or the prophecy. From 457 BC to 27 AD to 31 AD to 34 AD. 490 years have been cut off for thy people and thy city. Isn't that incredible? Depicting the Messiah that's going to come to save the lost house of Israel. 100% fulfillment according to the Word of God. The sad part is that Luke 19 explains in verse 41 to 44, he says, And when he was come near, he beheld the city, this is Jesus Christ, and he wept over it, saying, Thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Very sad story. Thou knewest not the time. I've given you everything you need to know. I've given you all the information you need to have. Not only must you look for signs at the end time, but I've even given you, when I was going to be alive, the house of Israel, I've given you prophecies to predict when I'm coming. So according to the prophecies of Daniel, God's covenant with the Jews ceased in 34 AD. This is a very difficult subject to discuss with a Jewish person, because clinically, this is what it says, Matthew 23:38. Behold, your house is left to you, what? Desolate. Question. How much is left when something is desolate? Nothing. Very hard message. The house, the lost house of Israel, which had the disciples had been sent back into, was now left desolate as the gospel was turned to the Gentiles. Acts 13, 46, 47. It was necessary that the word of God should first have been spoken to you. That's the Jewish nation. But seeing you put it from you, lo, we turn to the Gentiles, that thou shouldst be for salvation unto the ends of the earth. So this message was rejected by Israel, will now go to the Gentiles. If it wasn't for this one statement in the Bible, I certainly couldn't be preaching this gospel today. Galatians 6:15 to 16 speaks about the rite of circumcision, because up to that point in time, circumcision had been the requirement to become part of the house of Israel. Now, Paul says, for in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision means anything. What counts is a new creation. New rules apply to this situation. Everything was fulfilled to absolute perfection. Everything. Prophecy, time prophecy. Both of these have been given to us to prove to us that Jesus is God. Let's go into the third section. What about science? Let's not ask how yet. Is it possible that science can prove that Jesus is God? Is this a possibility? Well, some skeptics have suggested that the prophecies of Jesus were accepted coincidentally or were accidentally fulfilled by Jesus. Right? Evidence that demands a verdict by Josh McDowell has calculated what they call the science of probability. What is the chance of this happening? And it's like working out your chances of winning the lotto. According to the science, this is a scientific mathematical calculation, the science of probability, the chance of any one human being up until the present fulfilling a selection of just 8 of these prophecies. So from then to today where we are now, including the one on the cross, one person to fulfill only 8 prophecies is 1 times 10 to the power of 17. Now, I don't know if you know how big that is, but have a look at that number. It's 1 with so many zeros behind it. Okay. Then they go a step further. They say, well, what about the possibility of 48 prophecies? What would the chance be of what would the scientific calculation be of somebody by chance fulfilling 48 of these prophecies? Well, they work it out to be 1 times 10 to the power of 157. That's 1 with so many zeros. Now, to put this into context, the scientists calculate that if you were to take all the furniture in your living room and put it together into a big ball, then you take your car and the rest of your house and put it in a big ball. Then you take all the houses in your neighborhood and you squeeze it into the ball. Then you take your city and you put it into the ball. And you take the continent and you squeeze it into the ball as well. Then you take the earth and you squeeze it in there. And you take all the planets, Saturn and Mars and Venus, and you squeeze it into the ball. Then you take the outer planets and the galaxy and you squeeze it into a big ball. And you take the rest of it, the entire universe, and you squeeze it into a ball. That would be approximately, the weight of it is approximately 1 times 10 to the power of 80. How big is 1 times 10 to the power of 157? This is like billions and billions and billions of universes, the chance of this happening. So I decided to go and do an elementary study in Strong's exhaustive concordance to try and figure out how many messianic prophecies or predictions are there. Just specifically the messianic prophecies revolving around Jesus Christ or referring to Jesus Christ. Well, there you have them throughout the Bible. 8 prophecies in Genesis, 3 in Exodus, 1 in Leviticus, etc., etc. 34 in Isaiah. I calculated 115 messianic prophecies. 115. If 48 made 1 times 10 to the power 157, how many would 115 messianic prophecies take? Guess what? 115 foretold, 115 fulfilled. Incredible. There are 3 solutions that are given to us about who is God. This is the question we're asking. Who is God? Prove to us that you are God. Jesus Christ in His Word gives us 3 solutions. Prophecy, time prophecy, and statistics or science. Prophecy proves that Jesus is God because He lives outside the timeline. Time prophecy double proves that because not only does He live outside the timeline, He knows the dates and He tells you when certain things are going to happen. Time prophecy proves that Jesus is God. Oh, and science also proves that Jesus is God. There is no other God that has got prophecies like Jesus Christ. I've been through the Buddhist manuals, I've been through the ways of living and trying to get to nirvana. All the Buddhist manuals are ways to live. There's no prophecy in there. Go to the Islamic documents, they're not prophetic. None of the other gods, Shiva, Maitreya, Sokagaya, Jainism, none of them have any prophecy. Jesus Christ gives prophecy and time prophecy. So show me another God that can be predicted up to 100% accuracy, up to 1,000 years before He arrives. Show me another God whose time of arrival is foretold, the date of His baptism and what's going to happen before and after. Show me another God who can you don't have to do more, just equal those statistics of probability. Which other God was baptized in 27 AD? Which other God has a timeline predicted and fulfilled? See, this is the question. This is when the Lord, Jesus Christ, comes into His own. He proves beyond any doubt that He is God. And until somebody can bring me those 3 challenges, show me a God that is predicted with 100% accuracy up to 1,000 years before He's born. Show me another one that is foretold about His arrival and when it's going to happen, and the one that can fulfill just the same level of statistics. If you can give me that information, I will consider changing my allegiance. But up to that point in time, there is only one God, and that is Jesus Christ. I hope that you'll join me for part 2.